Get it on. Get it on. Get it on.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to and now watching the Wire to Wire podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Smethers. Today, we're going to hop into some NBA news, obviously making the biggest noise of the week. We're going to break that down a little bit more next week, but we're going to get into the tip of it today, and then we'll get into some baseball. Obviously, not a lot going on there, very frustrating. Then we'll get into some NFL, making steps forward. Everything's going according to plan in regards to the return from this pandemic. And then we'll get into UFC 250. Big card, a lot of fights that mean a lot to a lot of fighters on these cards. Big implications on title picture and stuff like that. So I will break down the prelims, the main prelims, and the main card. The early prelims have already started, so I'm just going to break down the prelims and the main card. A lot of good fights. But without further ado, let's get right into it. NBA official return July. Big, it seems so far out, but if you really think about it, it's not that far. They need, 3-4 weeks to get back into the swing of things. These guys have been sitting on the couch. They, not all of them have world-class gyms and world-class facilities at their own house. So returning 13 in the West, 9 in the East, just because of how the breakdowns were. There was a lot of clump. They were very congested for that 8 seed in the West, so they're returning 13 from them, 9 from the East. A lot more space over there, which makes sense because the West is better than the East. Everyone knows that. But a couple storylines here. We get to see Zion in a playoff run. Very exciting. The rules are a little different. If you're within 4.5 games, 8 and the 9 seed will play a play-in game or games to go to the to go into the playoffs. So that's very exciting. It's going to be a sprint 8-game kind of play-in tournament style setup. It's going to be very exciting. Another thing to look forward to in this wild world that we're living in, but it's going to be very exciting. I don't think there's going to be any asterisks in regards to anything that happens this season, or shouldn't, because this is going to be a sprint. This is going to be very tough. It's not going to be easy for any of these teams remaining to win this. They've all been sitting on the couch. None of them are riding momentum at this point. It's just whoever gets off on the better start is going to ride the hot hand to the championship, in my opinion. I think it opens the door for a lot more teams. Again, we will break it down further next week. I will give my chances on who I think has the best chance of winning, who's going to be a surprise team, just kind of break it all down. But big thing, Zion's in the playoffs. I think, honest to God, I think that was a reason why the the NBA decided to do 22 teams instead of 20. The Pelicans were right on the cutoff with. They were at that 21 spot, so they needed 22 teams to justify. Zion's a big draw on TV. Rightfully so. Give them a chance. And with this pandemic, the way they were playing those in that stretch, they were playing very well in a very tough part of their schedule. When the pandemic hit, they had the easiest part of their schedule coming up. So I think it completely justifies the Pelicans being in the playoffs. But just so much going on in the NBA. They're moving forward. Everyone's getting excited. We can't wait to see how this looks at that Disneyland resort or Disney World resort, the wild world of sports. It's going to be so fun. It's going to be so refreshing to see, live team sports back. It's all good. And then you go from that to the MLB, who doesn't know what the hell they're doing. The players don't know what they're doing. The ownership has no idea what they're doing. The league came out last week with an 82 game proposal, and the financials were all sorts of screwed up. And the players looked at that and said, "We're getting screwed on money here, and we don't like it. So how about we play 114 with prorated salaries?" And the ownership came back and said, "Well, we can't afford that. and that pissed off the players because the ownership won't open up the books to the players. So rightfully so, the players are getting pissed off because they're saying you can't afford it, but that doesn't make sense to us. So players came back with said, or the owners came back and said, how about we do 50 games with prorated salaries? And the players said that's not enough money. We want to play more. I really think we should stick with this 114, and no one is getting any closer to anything starting. There's been so many interviews with MLB players over this past week breaking down something that is frustrating so many people in the sports world and sports fans, not understanding why this deal is not getting done, why these guys can't just come to an agreement. It doesn't make sense to them. So I was listening to the Pat McAfee show, and they had on Trevor Bauer, the ace of the Reds, and he came out and said they all want to play. All players want to play. That's totally understandable. I totally believe him on that. But he, because he said what I said last week is these guys, all athletes are entertainers. That's the core of their job, is to entertain fans, because without fans, the paychecks are not nearly as big. So Trevor Bauer says that they need to get a certain amount of compensation because they are going out and still playing while there is a pandemic going on and whatnot. But the players want to come back and play. The owners, I'm sure, want to come back and make some sort of money because right now they're just losing money. At this point, they've lost so much money, it's pretty ridiculous. So again, nothing's going to happen until the players come together. But Trevor Bauer said something that I really want to emphasize to the people listening and watching, that if you've ever watched an MLB negotiation and when they come down to the collective bargaining and all that stuff, it never goes smoothly. They're always so far apart to start out, and actually always so far apart throughout the whole thing. It always seems like nothing's ever going to get done. And then one day, one side just goes, all right, we'll take it. I think that's what's going to happen here. I think there needs to be a few minor adjustments to either side's proposal. I think the players need to come down from 114. That's just too many games to try to squeeze in unless you want to start playing doubleheaders. You want to start playing doubleheaders, you can squeeze a lot more games in. But 114 is just too high at this point to ask these players to play, because you're going to have a 3-week spring training, just like the NBA is having a 3-4 week training camp. You're going to have a 3-week spring training. 114 is, you're going to be playing in December. It's already hard enough to play in October and November. It gets cold. The East Coast teams have shit weather. So you got to come down from 114. The owners, on the other hand, you have to agree to this prorated salary. You own the team. You have to pay this money. If you want to make any money at all, you have to pay these players to play the game. There's no argument from me on that side. You have to put prorated salaries at whatever amount of games you agree with. You have to pay it, because that's the right to their money. I don't want to hear the bullshit that you can't pay certain players, or you can't, it's just too much money. No, you sign these deals, you have to honor them. They're not asking for their salaries for 162 games. They're asking for their salaries for the amount of games they play. So owners, you have to show the money out. It is what it is. And like teams like the Oakland A's they're not paying their rent. They missed out on the rent check, which was like I think it was 1.3 or 1.4 million for their stadium rent, and the owner couldn't pay that. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. These owners are, at first I was on their side, and then some of this BS that they're trying to pull, it's just getting ridiculous. You're going ticky-tack on everything, and come on, man, you own a sports franchise, and some of you own multiple. It's just ridiculous that you would try to justify not paying your players the amount of games they play. It's just ridiculous. All right, away from that, NFL obviously moving forward. More players every week are coming back to the facilities. More and more players are allowed to. We're getting closer and closer. They're still a ways out. You would be missing OTAs right now, but the big thing everyone's looking forward to is what kind of training camp is each team going to get, and that's still yet to be seen. But all signs are pointing good. I still think they're going to have to cut a few games out, maybe a month worth of games, go from 16 to 12. But that's not that big of a chunk. I mean, it's a quarter of the season, but honestly, I could see that doing it and not hurting the season at all, just making it even more of a sprint and even more exciting, and something that we might just have to deal with, to be honest with you. But moving forward, everybody sounds optimistic about the NFL, and that is great. So let's get into it. UFC 250 tonight. Big fights, lot of major fights. The 135-pound first number one contender fights tonight. Winner gets the champion, and who honestly, well, I say gets the champion, but really gets a shot at the fight for the title because 135 is vacant. So it's just gonna be it's a great night of fight. Lots of fun fights, a lot of entertaining fights. Lots of guys that like to try to go for finishes. So it's gonna be an entertaining night of fights. Obviously, nothing like the last pay-per-view they had, but it's gonna be a good night to fight, a good night of fights, and worth the amount of money that you have to pay for it. So, like I said, I'm gonna break down the preliminary cards, sorry, and then the main card. And like I said, I will follow. You could follow me along on the Facebook page, and I will give you updates after each fight, along with my kind of 2 cents on every fight and what's going on and how I think the fights are going. Feel free to pitch in. Feel free to comment back if you don't agree, if you agree, whatever. Let's just watch fights together and have a good time. So let's start at the prelims. Sorry. So Charles Boyd versus Maki Patola. I'm gonna go with Charles Boyd here. It's gonna be two guys trying to make it new to the UFC, trying to make an impact. I got Charles Bird here. Sorry, not Boyd, Bird. Then you got Cody Stanman versus Brian Keller. In this fight, I'll take Cody Stanman. Again, lots of up-and-comers on this card. Very hungry, very entertaining. These are the fights that a lot of the time win the fight of the night. And this will be a great fight. And two guys that really want it, or you're going to see if they really want it and really want to be in the UFC. I got Cody Stanman in this one. I don't even know how to say that. Ian Heinisch versus Gerald Merscreet. I'll take Gerald Merscreet in this one. Because honestly, I don't know either fighter, but it's a middleweight fight. It's an interest. Middleweight always has young, entertaining fighters, so it should be good. Alex Caceres versus Chase Hooper. I think Alex Caceres kind of been the gatekeeper for the UFC, not the gatekeeper for the title picture. But if you could beat Alex Caceres, you can fight in the UFC. You can have a long career in the UFC. You can be a guy that maybe one day could contend. He's very talented. I think he wins this fight, kind of has a bounce back performance here. And I think he finishes Chase Hooper in the second. So that should be fun to watch. Alex Caceres is always all over the place. He's always throwing some flying stuff, crazy punches. He throws from all different levels, angles. He's all over the place. He's always fun to watch. And even if he gets taken down, his ground game, he's active. He's always active. He always has entertaining fights. Alex Caceres wins this fight and kind of bounces back here, so that should be fun to watch. All right, so let's start the main card. I'm going to give you my breakdown, my pick, what round, and how they finish it. So first one off, you got a bantamweight, Eddie Wineland versus Shane O'Malley. Obviously, Shane O'Malley's coming off a big win, a big return after a 2-year layoff due to testing positive in the USADA testing pool. He came back, looked fantastic in his last fight. And Eddie Wineland, been around forever, since WEC. The inaugural 135-pound WEC champion, been around forever, just fighting guys. He's fought everybody. He's got a wealth of just experience and knowledge of the game, Sean O'Malley here is going to have a little bit more trouble than people are uh, given credit for here. Eddie's going to definitely he's going to test him at least. I think Sean O'Malley over here, I think he's going to win and win quite convincingly, but there's going to be moments in this fight that you're going to see Sean definitely have to dig deep and prove the type of fighter he is, because Eddie's not a tough out for anybody. Eddie goes in there and he scraps, he claws, he fights very hard. He's always in the fight. He's got some power. He's great technique and just the experience, man. Experience is very underrated in the UFC game. This guy there's a chance he could shock the UFC here. I don't think he does though. Sean is just too talented, too lengthy, too rangy, too fast, hits too hard. He's just got too much talent for Wineland at this point in his career. So Sean O'Malley, I'm gonna go second round KO, TKO. Let's go TKO. Neil Magny versus Anthony Martin. Neil Magny looked good in his Neil Magny. I'm gonna go with Neil Magny here. Just rangy, looked good his last fight, and I think he's gonna rattle off a few here. In his last fight, it looked like he had figured some stuff out, and I think he keeps riding the momentum to a decision win over Anthony Martin here. So Neil Magny by decision. And then you got another bantamweight, a lot of bantamweight fights on this card. Another bantamweight fight, trying to figure out that 135 division. I can see what Dana's doing already. Aljamain Sterling versus Corey Sandhagen. If you've never seen Corey Sandhagen fight, this man is a monster. He is a absolute beast. And Aljamain Sterling is no joke and very, very tough. And he's the number one contender, or he was the number one contender before the 35-pounder. Henry Cejudo vacated the title. So here, this is a very tough fight. I just think for this point, Sandhagen, Aljamain Sterling here. I'm gonna have to take Aljamain Sterling just because of a little bit more experienced. He's still got all his athletic gifts. He's very, very he's a very, very, very well-rounded fighter. I think more well-rounded than Corey Sandhagen. But Corey Sandhagen is a beast. And I think Aljamain Sterling just remains on top here and gets his chance that he's been waiting for so long to fight for that 135-pound title. Aljamain Sterling, I'm going to take by decision. Rafael Sunsao versus Cody Garbrandt. This one's interesting, man. Cody Garbrandt, I think people are kind of looking too much into what happened in his last few fights. He's been knocked out a few times in a row. But the thing you got to think of, wasn't in the best headspace, I think, during those fights. A lot was going on at the time at Team Alpha Male. He's now left Team Alpha Male. And a lot was going on just with his mindset. I think those losses to TJ Dillashaw really, really messed up his head. But you cannot deny the fact that he hits extremely hard. He's got great wrestling skills. His head movement is good. The thing here is, once he gets touched, is he going to just want to just throw bombs? Because when he comes out and when you watched him in that second fight versus Dillashaw, what you saw was a guy who was picking his shots, cutting angles, looking good, really had really good technique, and I was getting the better of the exchanges early. He got clipped once, and a switch flipped in his head, and he went for broke. And the problem for that is when you go for broke versus TJ Dillashaw hits pretty hard too and has better head movement. So puts you on your ass twice. So Cody Garbrandt, though, hits hard. You've been hearing nothing but good things out of his camp here. I'm going to take Cody Garbrandt over a Sunsao by first round knockout. I think Garbrandt announces his return with authority to the 135-pound division. And honestly, if Cody Garbrandt is in his right mind and training the way that he wants to train, uh, watch out because he's very, very scary at that division. So at that weight. So very interesting. But Cody Garbrandt by first round KO. And then you have the women, the one of the one of the goats of the UFC and MMA history. Honestly, Amanda Nunes uh, versus Felicia Spencer at 145 pounds. Now, if you remember, Amanda Nunes is also a 135-pound champion. But she went up, moved up, and did what no one thought she could do, and she knocked out Cyborg, and in very convincing fashion. I mean, that fight was she clipped her early and just kept pouring it on. So Nunes has just absolute bricks for hands. She hits very hard, harder than any woman we've ever seen in the sport of MMA. And she's got great technique. And one thing you can't forget too, we don't see it very much, but she does have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So if it goes to the ground, she's very well versed. But there hasn't been one fighter that's gone up against Amanda Nunes that's been able to take the punch that Amanda Nunes has. Once you get touched by Nunes, you get dropped. And Felicia Spencer is a very technical fighter, very, very well rounded, but nothing really just pops off. She's just kind of one of those jack of all trades fighters, and I think this fight's going to be close. I think the length, it might give Amanda Nunes some problems early in the fight, but when Amanda Nunes finds her range here, she's going to knock out Felicia Spencer. So I'm going to go with Nunes by KO in the third. But Felicia Spencer is going to have some success early on, and she has a chance to shock some people. I don't think it's a very good chance, maybe not even a puncher's chance, but she's got a chance to shock some people if she can use her range and stay on the outside and kind of pick and choose her shots. We have seen Amanda Nunes get tired before, so if she can make it last that long, she might have a shot. But I think this one's pretty clear cut. Amanda Nunes in the third. It's going to take her some time to find the range. She hasn't fought in a pretty long time too, so there might be some ring rust there. But she is the GOAT for a reason. So, all right, guys. I just wanted to get this podcast out. Like I said, I'm moving to YouTube. I'm going to try to figure it out right now so I can get this posted before the fights and kind of get everything set up. But I thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for the continued support. Stay safe out there, guys. With everything going on, just make sure you take care of your family and take care of you. And stay safe. Have a good weekend, guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.